let's take a look. The core set. Dun dun dun. I think this is the button for this. Yeah. All right. So, Year of the Wolf. So we these are the cards that are leaving and that are coming into the core set, and we'll move this so my face isn't in the way of all of them. So Demon Hunter doesn't have that many changes. Uh, Corvus Bloodthorn didn't really see a ton of play. I'm probably like the only person who played it with any regularity with my Outcast deck. It is a slight bummer because Illidari Studies coming in and some of the new Outcast cards coming in could make that have more opportunities, but uh, not really. Yeah, none of these were really particularly frequently played. Um, Kane, Immolation, and Aura, and Illidari Studies were all pretty much staple cards in a variety of different Demon Hunter decks when they were around. So those should definitely be some pretty powerful tools for there. Ooh, oh god. Look at the returning cards later. These are cards that are returning, as in the right. Or you mean like just all the cards? I don't really know what you're saying. Um, Fenrir never really, none of these really saw that much play, with the exception of Earth and Scales. And frankly, I'm happy Earth and Scales is leaving. We no longer just have like the truly ridiculous survivability. Yeah, there are some cards that are being modified, if that's what you mean. I will pull that up as well. Nimsh with the 15 months and Sea Stone with the 35 months. The Eclipse is coming back for Druid is interesting. Also, Witchwood Apple. This is now a 1-cost spell that makes 1-cost 2/2 treants, apparently. So that's a pretty big deal. I don't know that this will necessarily be, see a lot of play, but it is very much, a more relevant than like previously. It was basically just used to put cards in your hand, right? Now, like these could actually be treants that you can play that actually do something. But yeah, all of the Eclipse cards, were pretty commonly played while they were in Standard, and I expect them to have that potential for strong options as well. We do still have Nourish, which is, I think kind of wild to me that we still have 5 costs Nourish in the core set. But that feels like where we're likely to sit and stay. With Guff gone, and it doesn't look like they're actually giving Druid the ability to get more than 11. There's that one card in the new set that, was this one goes to 11. They will be able to get to 11 and use that Beetle or whatever, but they're one of the ridiculous 20 mana stuff, which does make at least, the 5 mana Nourish is at least a bit less powerful. No, so Solar Eclipse, oops. Solar Eclipse doesn't affect the next Solar Eclipse. It'll make the next Solar Eclipse cast twice, but all that does is make the next thing you play cast twice. Because there's no like, oh, it casts twice as many times. So the Eclipse cards, like Solar Eclipse doesn't stack, which we learned back in, the original release of that. Hunter. We didn't really see Cloaked Hunters get much action, which was, not terribly surprising considering we didn't have a lot of great secrets for it. These are really good secrets that are coming back, and Doggy Biscuit coming back is really powerful for Hunter. We are losing Trog, which was one of the prime targets of early game Doggy Biscuits. But there's a number of buffs to things like for instance here, Jeweled Macaw. Jeweled Macaw is now a 1/2 instead of a 1/1. Which is a very big deal, in particular in a world of Demon Hunters, right? One of the big things is that 1 health minions were like already pretty troubled against Rogue and against Mage because they could just get punched, or against Druid, they just get punched and die. Demon Hunter really exacerbated that. You could just punch something on turn 1 without even using your coin, and that could be like, just kind of gross. So yeah, Jeweled Macaw going to 2 is, reasonably meaningful, if especially with Doggy Biscuit around. Wandering Monster and Cat Trick were 2 of the better secrets that Hunter has gotten in terms of just generally being applicable against a lot of different decks. Cat Trick, your opponent can get a pretty substantial threat, or can rather be facing a pretty substantial threat. Wandering Monster, can be very good in a slower hunter deck. Opponent attacks your face, boop, eat it. I don't know what the sort of nut Wandering Monsters are going to be these days, but Nerd-tastic with the 2 months. Welcome back. Much, much appreciated. How much of Shaw, never really saw very much play. Dire Frenzy didn't really have, something like a Vicious Scalehide to really give it that many great targets. Snake Trap has never been super exciting outside of like its synergies with stuff like Scavenging Hyena and whatnot, or Leatherworking Kit, but Leatherworking Kit, of course, is gone. Similarly, like most of the mage cards that are going away are among those that saw the least play. We're getting rid of Flame Strike for the first time. It had just gotten buffed to 5, but Flame Strike, now being no longer, the sort of iconic mage AoE removal spell. Even the buffed Cone of Cold out of here. Stargazer Luna is a very interesting one. Like that in like the sort of cheap aggro style mages has always been very powerful. Firelands Portal, definitely a card that's going to tilt some people having that random element. I'm curious if we'll see elemental stuff come back with the inclusion of Flame Geyser here. We did see that one mage spell, that new mage card that was like, was it if you played an elemental, discover a secret or something, I think, or not discover secret, discover spell. I forget if it's discover spell or if you cast a spell, discover an elemental. Regardless, there are some clues we may be seeing a at least minor elemental theme. Flame Geyser also 1 mana, 1 mana deal 2 damage, get the elemental. So this used to be 2 mana when it was originally around back in Ngoro days, but now this is much more efficient and pretty powerful. Arcane Artificer, I love Arcane Artificer. This is one of my favorite mage cards of all time. I absolutely love Arcane Artificer, and I'm very happy to see it back. As most of you know, I love to play, more like slower, more controlling mage decks, and the survivability of those style of decks can be troubled. And I always loved Arcane Artificer decks. Arcane Artificer into like Firelands Portal, for instance. Boom, suddenly gain 7 armor for 1 mana. And if your Artificer doesn't die, it can be extremely, extremely powerful. I love this card, and I'm super thrilled. This is probably the card that I'm the most excited to have back, just because of the way that it specifically supports the style of decks that I enjoy playing. And also, both tradable generally becoming an evergreen mechanic, as well as Fire Sale in particular entering the core set, I think is pretty exciting as well. Again, most of the cards that are leaving for Paladin are among the least played. It is interesting seeing all of these secrets leaving, right? Were these the only Paladin secrets that were even in the set? Like, are there no Paladin secrets in Standard now after this? Like, I know that they're introducing Rogue secrets, but it is interesting if they're, like, literally just taking secrets out of Paladin for this rotation. Because I think these are all of them, right? Ragnaros didn't really see very much play. Aldor similarly. But yeah, I think this is all of the secrets. I think there are now no secrets, which is interesting sort of design choice of just being like, hey, these aren't really things that people are playing with. This definitely does make like Paladin Discovers better. It is like pretty impactful. The cards that are coming in are also really, really good. Hand of Vidal, though the nerf version, that +2/+1. Hammer of Wrath down to 3 cost. Muster for Battle coming back is pretty wild. This was absolutely super powerful card for its time. And Lothraxion was one of the best dude synergy cards that they've ever printed. So the 2 of these coming back at the same time is very, very good. And also Grime Street Outfitter buffed. I loved Hand Buff Paladin back in the day. This is now like a much, much better version. This was probably the worst hand buff card when it was around as it is. Just because, it cost... Previously, it was a 2-cost 1/1. Now it's a 2-cost 2/2. It's like less embarrassing tempo-wise. Bummer the Paladin quest is going. Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's sad that you can't play these together. It's like, no, that would have just been dumb, right? Like a lot of the things that, like, they're often very intentionally adding stuff like muster for battle after the dude quest is gone, or Letharxian after the dude quest is gone, or like uh I don't know, like these after the whole set of druid stuff that's like so powerful right now are gone. Oh yeah, it is a demon draw for Purator. That's actually interesting too. So priest is a pretty major set of changes. I think everyone expected Radiant Elemental to go. Um, Murazond is probably the only one of these cards that saw like even like a tiny amount of play other than Radiant. Cleric, bizarrely, outside of what's it? Boar Priest really didn't see very much play. Um, Dark Bishop Benedictus being added to the core set is pretty interesting. It does give you the ability to keep playing Undead Priest, which is very powerful right now. The Undead Aggro Priest. Um, Mana Geode. So Mana Geode was a card that I played a ton in its original iteration, and it used to just be if this is healed, right? Now it's Overheal, which is interesting. Overheal, for those who don't know, is a new mechanic, a new evergreen mechanic for Priest. That is, if this is healed past its maximum. Um, Overheal, I really, really, really like as a mechanic, because one of the things about Priest that is the most frustrating is that the Priest hero power is at its best when it is targeting minions, because otherwise it's just a worse version of Armor Up, right? If you hero power your own face, you can't go above max health. So it's just better to target minions with it. It's the only way in which it is better than Armor Up, right? So now having things that reward you for targeting them if they are not damaged makes it so that you actually have utility for your hero power if your opponent isn't like playing things for you to attack into. So I really, really, really like basically all of these, the inclusion of all of these. Katrina Muerte is interesting because this used to just be then your turn to resurrect another minion. Now it's undead minion. And that was something that I did see some commentary, I think, from Cora talking about how there's very frequently frustration from the play pattern of Resurrect Priest, that you typically just get gigantic things into play and resurrect them, and that just kind of wasn't fun because it just ended up kind of being the same thing every time. And that by focusing Priest on resurrecting undead, that they're raising the dead, the Shadow Priest style thing, they can make it so that, like, hey, you're not just going to be resurrecting like whatever the biggest, most powerful thing in the current format is all the time. So you have like a more controlled experience with that. I think this is still like a powerful card. This used to cost 8 mana in the old version, by the way, but which would just resurrect a friendly minion. So now this can just kind of be it can be allowed to be more efficient, 7 instead of 8, and it's more controlled and contained. And then, but what I really like, again, is like with the stuff like the Crimson Clergy, Mana Geode, Holy Champion, Shadow Ascendant, you can just play a proactive, like, mid-range priest deck that aims to, heal your own minions and like have this sort of board, and you aren't just, absolutely at a loss if your opponent doesn't actually play like a 1-drop on turn 1 that you could attack into and heal your guy, right? You actually have utility from your hero power if you play Crimson Clergy on 1, and then just you can go ahead and heal it. And then we also see Shard coming back. Shard, I'm actually slightly disappointed that Shard is coming back. I was sort of hoping we would have a little bit of a reprieve from the AoE silence, incredibly efficient AoE silence of Shard, since it's been around for 2 years now. But I can see how, with making tradable an evergreen mechanic, that they want to add this here. Oops, I keep clicking this. That they want to add it back to the pool. But yeah, overall, I think it's fine. Not a huge fan, because it does, having just like that easy access, that cheap access to an AoE silence can make a lot of other fun stuff just not really as fun, but maybe it's necessary given the power level of some sort of, buffs and things like that. I do see a question. What does the evergreen mechanic mean? That means it's the mechanic that is intended to be included always. So, um, like a mechanic like, you know, Rush is now an evergreen mechanic, or the Secret mechanic is now an evergreen mechanic. Battle Cry is an evergreen mechanic. It's a mechanic that you can expect to show up all the time, rather than it being something like Echo, which is just a mechanic for a particular set. So, but yeah, Rogue. Rogue losing mostly cards that didn't see a ton of play, which seems to be generally the target that the dev team has for what they're doing with the core set is removing offenders and removing cards that didn't really get a lot of love for things that create other sorts of packages that you can include that may get to do more. The only one of these that really saw any significant play was Sprint. Vanessa occasionally, but Sprint was really the only one that was ever really a core component of any decks, and is now largely invalidated by concoctions giving you access to the same thing, so you don't need to play Sprint. And then we see Rogue with the Hanar and Secret package returning. Looks like Rogues are getting, which makes more sense, frankly, thematically, that Rogues have the secrets than Paladins had secrets. Hanar is a really, really powerful card. Although it's interesting. Hanar coming back at the same time Paladin secrets are leaving means that you can't do the Hanar into a 1-cost secret, right? Hanar into a 1-cost secret used to be a thing that actually happened a lot to get new secrets. You'd specifically play your Hanar with a secret, get a 1-cost, play a 1-cost, get another secret, helps protect the Hanar. But that you can't do anymore, right? With no Paladin secrets in the sort of Discover pool, all of those rogue cards that get other classes secrets are now just Mage and Hunter, right? So I can't think of. I guess is Galloping Savior. What set was that from? Like, were there any Paladin secrets? I don't think there's any Paladin secrets in the past year. I think that this rotation with these coming out means that there's only Rogue Mage, and Hunter secrets. So that means that this is always going to get Rogue Mage, which on the one hand is interesting, in that you have a smaller pool that you're discovering from for the rogue things like this and Perjury. So I want does it only give you one of each class, or is it going to be 2 from one from another? Yeah. Did I say Rogue and Mage? I obviously meant Mage and Hunter. There's Rogue, Mage, and Hunter are the 3 that have it. The classes that are not Rogue are Mage and Hunter. But yeah. So the Rogue secrets here that are coming back themselves. Ambush is pretty good. These were interesting. We have Elven Minstrel coming back as a 3/3 rather than 3/2. This was a very powerful card for its time, and now it's stronger statistically. Fan of Knives coming back at 2 cost rather than 3 cost. And then Eviscerate returning. I keep accidentally clicking, which is closing it. All right, let's go into Shaman. Kragwa rotating is a huge nerf to Countess, because you can't just infinitely invitation. It's really tragic. But again, mostly cards that didn't really see a significant amount of play. Shaman getting some pretty heavy overload cards here. Overdraft. Ancestral Knowledge coming back. Ancestral Knowledge at Overload 1. So Ancestral Knowledge at Overload 1, I think it's actually just legitimately a good card. And having something that actually allows you to build up to your synergies and stuff, and actually dig for these things is really nice. Zap at 0, still pretty sweet. Overdraft, without specific. No. I don't want to do anything there. Without very specific things like pushing you in the direction of Overload. I'm not necessarily convinced you're going to see Overload decks even with Overdraft, but I expect that this is setting up to get more Overload synergy style cards. Grand Totem Eyesore is back with Thing from Below. I were the totem cards. Yeah, the totem cards were from this year. So these actually could be a really big deal. I had tried to make Totem Shaman work so many times, so many times, um, and there just really weren't enough tools for it. But Eyesore and Thing from Below are both a really big deal for the ability to make like a Totem Shaman deck. I think the vast majority of cards from my Totem Shaman deck were all from the year that is not rotating. So I'm excited to try with these. Also, obviously, a lot of the powerful things from the previous year rotating out as well. But yeah, some sweet stuff. Warlock, most of the Warlock cards rotating. I'm a little sad that the discard stuff is going away without really ever having had a chance to shine. It was, I loved me some Jeklik. Didn't really have enough tools to make it work. But we are getting some really powerful things for them here. We have Mal'Ganis, Void Color Dreadlord. So here's a package for you. Very, very powerful. Defile, obviously, super strong card. We all know it. Spirit Bomb is efficient removal if there's like self-damage theme stuff in Warlock. That can be very, very, very cool. This can be like tools for like big Warlock, right? We have big undead Warlock currently. This can be big demon Warlock. But yeah, you can also even set up Mal'Ganis Jailer. For the period that those two are both around. Mal'Ganis Jailer makes you immune to damage on your turn, such as a fatigue, immune to damage, period. And if your opponent can't clear with something like a Twisting Nether or whatever, they just can't do damage to you ever. So you're dead. Warrior, also, we're seeing the rotation of most of the core set cards that didn't see a ton of play. I may be like one of the only people in the world who's played Armorsmith in recent memory. Was pretty nice against aggressive decks out of Enrage Warrior, but not really likely to be worth most of the time. Ended up cutting it for most of the first of those decks. And those decks are much happier to have access to things like Sword Eater. Armageddillo, excellent. Armageddillo, Frightened Flunky, Sword Eater for a taunt package, which you don't really see much of. Have you played around Bladestorm? Bladestorm, obviously great at killing pairs of big minions. And we see Mech's back. We also see Magnetic coming back down here. Dynomatic, really, really powerful in mech decks. One of the big things here, however, is Woodcutter's Axe. One of the things that I've mentioned many, many times is that I feel like one of the big problems that Warrior has is they didn't have good cheap weapons, whereas all these other decks have things like, Bone Breaker or Cutlass or whatever. That the only cheap weapon in Warrior was like Fire War Axe or like the Hatchet. And Woodcutter's Axe, 2/2 weapon, with this death rattle that no longer is only on a rush minion. This used to be give the +2/+1 to a random rush minion. This is just random friendly minion. So this can be an excellent card in any kind of proactive deck, buffing whatever minions that you might be playing. So very much like the inclusion of this, and think it's actually a pretty big deal that we'll see a lot of play. So I see a comment in the chat. Can't believe Black Knight made a whole rotation without being buffed back to 2 mana. So here's the thing. I had a discussion with Alico from the balance team about this, and a big part of why there's never a change to Fire War Axe wasn't necessarily that like, oh, Fire War Axe at 3 is good enough, or that Fire War Axe at 2 would necessarily be too good, but it's that the nature of weapons is such that you don't tend to play very many of them in a deck. And if the best weapon is just the most boring basic weapon of 2 cost, 3 damage, 2 cost, 3/2 weapon, like original Fire War Axe, you just don't have interesting cards seeing play, right? So it's much more interesting that you have something like Woodcutter's Axe as like a weapon that sees play than Fire War Axe at 2 is a weapon that sees play, because it at least is more dynamic than just here's numbers, right? This like does something, and you build your deck in such a way to take advantage of the something, rather than it just being, hey, this is just good at hitting people, whether you're a control deck, whether an aggro deck, So I'd much rather if Woodcutter's Axe is the weapon that sees play in, most warrior decks, or maybe just the aggressive warrior decks, and that there's instead a you know a version that a control deck wants that's more similar to say like an Outriders Axe or something. So you when the best thing is a boring thing, that's generally a failure, right? So I despite the fact that I think that Fire Vortex could have been changed to be 2 mana without being deleterious to the game balance of Standard, I think that it would have been boring. So I'm glad that they're looking at something like this. So now, again, on the left, things that are going away. On the right, things that are being added. A lot more in the neutrals. So all the explorers, they've had their day in the sun. Only really Bran had his day in the sun, and I think most of us are glad that he's going back underground into Ironforge or wherever it is that he's exploring. It's his brother who's the king of Ironforge. Bran is the one who was like you found in like various caverns or whatever, because League of Explorers. As far as things that are going away that are significantly impactful, again, Bran. Mana Saber saw a couple of instances of play here and there. Murloc Tiny Fin, tragic. Mistress of Mixtures. Acidic Swamp Ooze didn't really see very much play as a result of the inclusion of Rustrat Viper, but Rustrat Viper is being returned. And then Faces Manipulator saw some fringe play in combo style decks, but none of these were super impactful in the metagame outside of Bran and perhaps Mistress of Mixtures, really. But what's coming back, these are mostly higher impact things, right? Ragnaros is just a cool card, and I don't know that he's necessarily good in the modern world. Same thing with Dr. Boom, but they are now here. Ziliax, everyone's favorite Unity Precision Perfection, coming back alongside a bunch of other mechs. Black Knight now a 4-cost 4/4 as opposed to a 6-cost 4/5. Definitely seeing how effects like this can be better in the modern world. Dirty Rat is back. So this is obviously a pretty powerful inclusion. Not at the same time as Bran. But still a very powerful tool for potentially disrupting combo decks. Just a very fun card in general too. I've always loved Dirty Rat ever since it was reintroduced. Cult Neophyte as a card that is back in the classic set is also something that I really like. I love having this sort of disruption available for anyone who wants it against spell-based decks, because typically speaking, spell-based decks are the ones that you have few ways to generally interact with. So having, a tool like this in the core set that you can be, able to reach for if you want to slow people down is great. Wargear is back, buffed, now a 6/5. I kind of don't like the fact that some of these mechs are buffed. Like this one, like mostly Wargear, because this is just like, it's so, I don't know, aesthetically unpleasing that it's 6/5. This being 3/2. I don't know. It's fine, I guess. But Replicating Menace, Wargear, and Bronze Gatekeeper all getting buffs. This is 1 health, this is 1 power, this is 1 power. The Bronze Gatekeeper buff is actually a really big deal. This is just a 3-cost 2/5 taunt with an additional ability. So pretty impactful here from the Bronze Gatekeeper change. Royal Librarian now, curses. Royal Librarian getting buffed. He's a 4/4 rather than a 3/4. Rotten Applebaum and Armor Vendor, some decent survivability. Rotten Applebaum also being undead, so there's some synergies available there. Armor Vendor, kind of the alternate 1-drop to Mistress of Mixtures for decks that are looking to have some ability to keep themselves alive and are not looking to burn the opponent down. Dread Corsair, we have the Pirate Quest is gone. Dread Corsair and Sword Eater back together is pretty nice. And then Hench Clan Thug. We haven't really seen Hench Clan Thug legal in a format with Demon Hunter, have we? So Hench Clan Thug is pretty sweet with obviously Rogue. Was a very powerful card with Rogue in those formats, and then the ability to use this with, like, say, the 1-cost hero power from Demon Hunter can be quite good. And then Tour Guide in Glacial Shard, some pretty solid 1-drops. Murmy's actually an undead Murloc too, So just generally some solid inclusions, and we've traded Murloc Tiny Fin for Snow Flipper Penguin, as far as the cute zero cost 1/1 is concerned. So I don't know what to feel about that. There are certainly more synergies with Murloc Tiny Fin, but Snow Flipper Penguin, he's surfing on a sheet of ice. So how can you really argue with that? We do have, I believe, um, the list of other things that are changing, because there are some card changes that are not necessarily the things that are being added or removed. Here we go. Boop. This is adjustments. Boom. So these are all cards that are getting changed in some way. Flame Reaper, I believe, was previously 4 power. Ganarg was 3/2, now 3/3. Wrathscale Naga, this is a big one. Wrathscale Naga being a 3/3 rather than a 3/1 is a pretty big deal. This was a card that I didn't even play in my token Demon Hunter decks because it was just so fragile, so easy to kill. So this is actually a pretty big change. This is one that I think is worth looking out for, because this is now I think a much more difficult thing to remove that can be a very big deal. Metamorphosis now costs 4 instead of 5. This was I think pretty inefficient, and now much more powerful. Ancient of Lore is a 7 cost 7/7 instead of 5, and now restores 7 health. So maybe this actually sees some play. Druid of the Claw was a 5 cost 4/6, or was a 5 cost that made a 4/6 or a 6/4. Now it's a 7/6 or 4/9. So either version of Druid of the Claw is actually reasonably efficient now. We already talked about everything on the right-hand side, so I'm just going over the left-hand side here. Soul of Forest now costing 3. This is actually a pretty huge change. Soul of the Forest had been for a very long time, a go-to for rebuilding your board for any kind of token druid deck. Kind of fell out of favor. So the change here, I think, is a nice one. And I do want to preemptively comment on some of these. A lot of people will be like, oh, they'd nerfed Ancient of Lore and now they're buffing it like power creep, whatever. And I think for one, there is some degree of power creep clearly going on here. The game has generally gotten faster as time has gone on. But on the other hand, part of the reason that cards like Ancient of Lore were nerfed to begin with was because of the previous philosophy of the Classic set, which was always available in Standard all the time. And it was not nerfed necessarily because it itself was just fundamentally too powerful of a card to exist in Hearthstone. It was that it was crowding out other new designs that would have to be more and more powerful in order to justify their inclusion. So, I think that these cards being buffed, yes, it is a sign of the overall power level of Hearthstone increasing, but it isn't some sort of philosophical failure of well, they nerfed it and removed it and then brought it back and buffed it simply because what the core set is very different than what the Classic set was, which I think it's also a much better thing because it allows for things like this of much more dynamic environment by bringing in and removing things from year to year. So I think it's overall a very good thing and not some sort of again failure of design or development that some people suggest that anything like this would be. Anyway, Treants now cost 1 as 2/2s instead of 2, which we talked about with the Witchwood Apple. Savannah Highmane is now a 7/5 instead of a 6/5. Babbling Book, 2 health. True Silver Champion restores 3 health when you attack with it. This had really gotten, both with the generally higher power level of a lot of minions, as well as, just more competition. It's definitely a good change to this, I think. Consecration now costing 3. This was kind of inevitable. We had Relentless Winter in Death Knight, which was exactly Consecration, but draw a card. So I like this change. It also means that we don't have the eternal competition between True Silver, Consecration, Blessing of Kings at 4, Consecration 1. It got promoted to a 3-drop. Draconid Operative going to a 4/5 for 4 instead of a 5/6 for 5. I like this change a ton. Part of this is sort of the faster pace of the game, but a 5-drop that didn't have taunt was just really hard to justify. That didn't otherwise also immediately impact the board. Holy Nova back to damaging enemies, damages opponents, and not just damaging opposing minions. Psychic Conjurer, Swashbuckler also going to 2 health. This is one thing that is very much indicative. We see a lot of this. A lot of the 1-drops going to 1/2s instead of 1/1s. This is Demon Hunter's fault. And the introduction of a class that is able to kill a 1 health minion without spending more than 1 mana basically means that unless they have a tremendous immediate benefit or the potential to massively snowball the game, you're not going to get away with a 1 health minion. Really, these all basically the body was just super irrelevant, and now it at least isn't just dead instantly against Demon Hunters. Feral Spirits now only overload 1. Definitely is a good update there. Hex has returned. Hex has returned, and it only costs 3. Menacing Nimbus up to a 2/3, and Hellfire down to 3 cost. So all of these, I think, are pretty good changes. I'm very happy with them. I have seen people saying, oh, they didn't nerf Shadow Step or remove Shadow Step. I think the issues surrounding Shadow Step are a lot of them are more surrounding the other cards, like Bran, which is being removed. Obviously, you do still have Shadow Step Estalor as a thing that Rogue can do. I feel like the sort of Shadow Step and Shadow Step style cards are pretty core to the Rogue identity. So I'm not terribly surprised to see it remaining in the format and unchanged. And yeah, a lot some of the cards that were sort of abusive there, like Mailbox Dancer with Shadow Step, are also going away. So, but overall, I really like these changes coming to the core set. I think there's a lot of both good buffs as well as good additions and removals. I'm probably, again, as I was mentioning before, the card that I'm most excited about may just be the Artificer, Arcane Artificer, the mage card, and also just generally the Priest overheal mechanic and the return of some old friends like Mana Geode that I did love so much a long time ago. But anyway, core set. Definitely, again, the philosophy of the core set is something that I absolutely get behind. I was probably the loudest proponent of Hearthstone moving to a core set rather than the classic set for years. And I am glad to see that they are continuing with the general philosophy of hey, let's keep updating it and keep changing both the components of the core set as well as the specifics of the cards within to keep things fresh and fun and not be married to sort of old philosophies and old card designs that really kept Hearthstone, I think, staler than it needed to be for a while. And now we get more dynamic stuff, and it is fun. Yeah.